The notification sound from Lisa's phone cut through the quiet evening air like a knife. We were sitting on our back deck, watching 14-year-old Ethan practice basketball shots while 11-year-old Sophie read nearby. It should have been one of those perfect family moments that made all the long hours of construction work worth it. "Honey, your phone," I said, nodding toward the device lying face up on the patio table. Lisa barely glanced at it. "Just leave it. I'm enjoying this." But I had already seen the preview. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Brad." My stomach dropped. Brad? I didn't know any Brad in our circle of friends. The heart emojis made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt since my father's heart attack 5 years ago. "Who's Brad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Lisa's hand shot out faster than I'd ever seen her move, snatching the phone and sliding it into her back pocket. "Just a parent from school. You know how they are with questions about their kids." Her explanation felt rehearsed, but I nodded and said nothing more. 22 years of marriage had taught me when to push and when to wait. This was definitely a waiting moment. Over the next few days, I found myself paying attention to details I'd been unconsciously ignoring. Lisa had been working late more frequently over the past few months. She'd started going to the gym after work instead of before, which she claimed was because of her schedule change. Her phone, which used to lie around carelessly, now never left her side. She'd also become increasingly critical of small things around the house. The way I loaded the dishwasher, how I folded the laundry, whether I remembered to put the toilet seat down. Little complaints that had escalated from occasional observations to daily irritations. "You never really listen when I talk about my day," she'd said just last week over dinner. "I tell you about problems at school and you just nod and grunt." At the time, I'd felt defensive. After 10 hours of managing construction crews and dealing with difficult clients, I thought I was doing pretty well to engage in conversation at all. But now, looking back, I wondered if her complaints had been more than just nagging. Maybe they'd been attempts to get my attention, to signal that something was wrong. The construction business had taught me to notice when something wasn't structurally sound. The foundation of my marriage was showing cracks. I waited until the following Tuesday when Lisa claimed she had a late parent-teacher conference. At 6:30 p.m., I drove past Roosevelt Elementary where she taught 4th grade. The parking lot was empty except for the security guard's car. Every light in the building was off. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the conference was at a restaurant. Maybe it was at the parents' house. Maybe I'd misunderstood. But deep down, I knew I hadn't misunderstood anything. I sat in that empty parking lot for 20 minutes, watching the shadows lengthen across the playground equipment. This was the school where Lisa had worked for 15 years, where she'd won Teacher of the Year twice, where parents requested her specifically for their children. She loved this place. She'd never lie about being here unless something was seriously wrong. When I got home, Lisa's car wasn't in the driveway. Ethan was at basketball practice, and Sophie was at her friend's house, so I had the house to myself. I paced from room to room, trying to make sense of what I'd discovered. At 9:15 p.m., Lisa's car pulled into the driveway. I was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to review work invoices. "How was the conference?" I asked without looking up. "Long, tedious. You know how some parents can be." Lisa moved around the kitchen, putting away her purse, checking the mail, avoiding eye contact. "Did you eat dinner?" "Grabbed something on the way home from Ethan's practice. How's the Morrison kid doing? The one with the reading problems?" Lisa froze. There was no Morrison kid in her class, but she couldn't know that I knew that. "Oh, you know, slowly improving. These things take time." She was lying again. Easily. Smoothly. Like she'd had practice. "I'm going to take a shower," she announced, heading upstairs without waiting for a response. I heard the bathroom door close, then the sound of running water. A moment later, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Lisa's voice, muffled but audible through the bathroom vent, talking on the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was intimate, affectionate. She was talking to someone in a way she hadn't talked to me in years. That weekend, while Lisa took Sophie shopping for school clothes, I did something I never thought I'd do in my marriage. I opened our joint laptop and checked our credit card statements. What I found made me physically sick. Charges at Romano's Italian Bistro, the same restaurant where Lisa and I had our anniversary dinner every year, on dates when she claimed to be staying late for faculty meetings, hotel charges at the Marriott downtown during lunch hours, purchases at Victoria's Secret that never made it home, coffee shops across town during times when she should have been teaching. 6 months of evidence stared back at me from the screen. The pattern was clear. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, always the same time frame, always charges in locations far from the school. I printed everything and organized it chronologically. The first charge was from early March, a coffee shop on the other side of town at 3:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. Then another coffee charge the following Thursday. By April, the charges had escalated to lunch restaurants. By May, there were hotel charges. 6 months. Half a year of deception. I sat at my desk staring at the evidence, feeling like I was drowning. 22 years of marriage, 2 children, a mortgage, joint bank accounts, shared dreams, all of it contaminated by these little charges that told the story of my wife's secret life. My phone rang, jolting me back to reality. It was my brother-in-law, Jim, calling about weekend plans. "Michael, you sound terrible. Everything okay?" Before I could think about it, the words spilled out. "I think Lisa's having an affair." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus, are you sure?" "Pretty sure. I found credit card charges and her stories don't add up." "Where are you right now?" "Home. Lisa's out with Sophie." "Stay put. I'm coming over." Jim arrived 20 minutes later, his expression grim. He'd been practicing family law for 15 years, and I could see him shifting into professional mode even as he hugged me at the front door. "Show me what you found," he said without preamble. I handed him the folder of credit card statements and explained about the text message, the empty school parking lot, and Lisa's increasingly strange behavior. Jim flipped through the pages methodically, his expression growing more serious with each sheet. "How long have you suspected?" "Consciously, about a week. But looking at these statements and thinking back, there have been signs for months, maybe longer." "Have you confronted Lisa yet?" "No, I wanted to talk to you first." Jim leaned back in my desk chair, running his hands through his hair. "Smart move. Before you do anything else, we need to protect your assets and your parental rights. In cases like this, emotions run high and people make rash decisions that hurt them later." He explained the process of filing for a temporary asset preservation order, which would prevent either of us from making major financial moves without court approval. He also recommended hiring a private investigator to document Lisa's activities legally. "I know this feels like an invasion of privacy," Jim said, "but if this goes to court, you'll want solid evidence, especially if you're seeking primary custody of the kids." The word custody hit me like a physical blow. In all my anger and hurt, I hadn't fully processed that this might mean splitting time with Ethan and Sophie. "What are my chances?" I asked. "Given your work schedule stability and the evidence of Lisa's extracurricular activities, I'd say good. But we need to document everything properly. Courts don't care about credit card statements and suspicious behavior. They care about facts, patterns, and what's in the best interest of the children." That afternoon, Jim gave me the contact information for Patricia Wells, a private investigator he'd worked with on other cases. She was a former police detective with 20 years of experience in surveillance and evidence gathering. I called her that evening and arranged to meet the next day. Patricia's office was in a nondescript building downtown, sandwiched between a tax preparation service and a bail bondsman. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and the kind of direct manner that probably served her well in law enforcement. "Tell me why you think your wife is having an affair," she said, pulling out a legal pad. I explained everything. The text message, the credit card charges, the lies about working late, the empty school parking lot. Patricia took notes while I talked, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me seriously. "I need you to understand something," she said. "What I do is completely legal, but it's not easy to watch. Are you prepared for what we might find?" "I think so." "No, you don't think so. You hope your wife is having coffee with a friend and that there's an innocent explanation for everything. But if I take this case, I'm going to follow her until I know exactly what she's doing and with whom. If she's having an affair, I'm going to document it in detail. Are you prepared for photographs of your wife kissing another man?" Are you prepared for hotel receipts and timeline reports that leave no doubt about what's happening? I swallowed hard. Yes? Good. Because once we start down this road, there's no going back. Whatever I find becomes evidence, and evidence has a way of taking on a life of its own. Patricia's retainer was $3,000, money I'd have to take from our joint savings account, which meant Lisa might notice. But Jim had advised me to get documentation quickly, before Lisa had a chance to become more careful about covering her tracks. How long do you think it will take? I asked. If she's as careless as these credit card statements suggest, probably not long. Cheating spouses usually follow patterns. Once I identify the pattern, it's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time with a camera. Patricia's first report arrived 3 days later, and it was devastating. Lisa had met a man at the Starbucks on 5th Street at 4:15 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. They'd sat together for 30 minutes, holding hands across the table and speaking intimately. When they left, they'd kissed in the parking lot. Not a friendly peck, but a passionate embrace that lasted nearly a minute. The man had then followed Lisa to his apartment complex, where they'd remained for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Patricia had photographed everything. The man was Brad Harris, 42 years old, divorced father of one of Lisa's students. He worked as an insurance adjuster and lived in a modest apartment complex across town. Seeing those details in black and white made everything real in a way that credit card statements couldn't. This wasn't just financial infidelity or emotional cheating. This was a full-blown affair, complete with afternoon meetings and hotel visits. I stared at the surveillance photos for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman in the pictures with the woman I'd been married to for 22 years. The Lisa in the photos looked happy, animated, younger somehow. She was laughing in one picture, touching Brad's arm in another. In the parking lot photo, her body language was completely relaxed, like she belonged there. When had she stopped looking at me that way? When had I stopped making her laugh like that? Patricia's subsequent reports painted a picture of a relationship that had been going on for at least 6 months. They met twice a week, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays when Lisa claimed to have late school obligations. Sometimes they went to hotels, sometimes to his apartment. Once they'd driven to a movie theater in the next town over. The most damning report came after Patricia followed them to lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown. They'd shared a bottle of wine, fed each other dessert, and behaved like a couple celebrating an anniversary. When they left, they'd gone directly to the Marriott, where they'd stayed for 3 hours. Meanwhile, I'd been home helping Sophie with her science project, never knowing that my wife was across town playing house with another man. While Patricia documented Lisa's activities, I documented her behavior at home. I started keeping a detailed diary of every time she missed one of the kids' events, every unexplained absence, every lie about her whereabouts. The pattern was worse than I'd realized. Over the past 6 months, Lisa had missed 4 of Ethan's basketball games, claiming work obligations. She'd skipped Sophie's school play because of a mandatory faculty meeting that I now knew had never happened. She'd been late picking up the kids from after-school activities at least a dozen times, always with excuses about traffic or last-minute parent conferences. Our children had been paying the price for Lisa's choices without even understanding why. The hardest part was acting normal. Sitting across from Lisa at dinner, helping Sophie with her homework, watching Ethan's basketball games, all while knowing that my wife was living a double life. Lisa seemed completely oblivious to my growing suspicion. If anything, she'd become more affectionate over the past few weeks, perhaps from guilt, or maybe because her affair was making her feel more confident and attractive. She'd started initiating physical contact more often, suggesting date nights, even talking about planning a family vacation for the summer. "I was thinking we could rent a cabin in the mountains," she said one evening while we cleaned up after dinner. "Remember how much fun we had at Lake Tahoe a few years ago?" I wanted to scream. Here she was, planning family vacations while spending her afternoons in hotel rooms with another man. "Sounds great," I managed to say. "We should start looking at options." "I love you, Michael," she said, kissing my cheek before heading upstairs. The casual cruelty of those words, spoken by someone who was actively betraying our marriage, almost broke me. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in early October. Lisa claimed she had a mandatory teacher training workshop that would run until 9 p.m. I'd heard this excuse before and knew it was false, But this time, the lie had consequences beyond my hurt feelings. At 7:30, Sophie had a mild allergic reaction to something she'd eaten. Nothing serious, but scary enough that I wanted to take her to urgent care as a precaution. Her face had broken out in hives, and she was having trouble breathing. I called Lisa's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called the school. The night janitor told me there were no teacher workshops scheduled that evening. I called Lisa again, leaving an increasingly frantic voicemail. Lisa, Sophie's having an allergic reaction. I'm taking her to urgent care. Call me back immediately. While I sat in the urgent care waiting room with Sophie, who was feeling better after some Benadryl but still needed to be checked out, I realized I couldn't continue the charade any longer. Is Mommy coming? Sophie asked, her voice still slightly hoarse. I don't know, sweetheart. She's at a work thing. She's always at work things now. The innocent observation from my 11-year-old daughter hit harder than any of Patricia's surveillance reports. Our children had noticed their mother's absence even if they didn't understand the reason. Sophie was fine, just a reaction to shellfish she'd accidentally ingested. But the incident crystallized something for me. What if it had been serious? What if one of my children had needed their mother, and she was unreachable because she was with another man? Lisa finally called back at 10:15 p.m., just as we were getting home from urgent care. Oh my God, Michael, I'm so sorry. My phone was on silent during the workshop. Is Sophie okay? She's fine now. Where was this workshop again? At the district office. You know how they are about phones during training sessions. Another lie, told smoothly and without hesitation. I'll be home in 20 minutes, she said. Give Sophie a kiss for me. Lisa arrived home exactly 20 minutes later, full of apologies and concern for Sophie. She examined our daughter carefully, asked all the right questions, and tucked her into bed with extra hugs and kisses. To anyone watching, she would have seemed like a devoted mother who'd simply been unavailable due to work obligations. But I knew better. While her daughter was having a medical emergency, Lisa had been with her lover, her phone turned off so they wouldn't be interrupted. I called Jim on the way home. I need to confront her this weekend, I said. I can't keep living like this. Do you have enough evidence? More than enough. Patricia has photos, I have financial records, and tonight proved that her priorities are completely screwed up. Then let's plan this carefully. You'll only get one chance to control the narrative. Jim recommended I speak with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a family psychologist who specialized in helping families navigate divorce situations involving children. Dr. Mitchell met with me the next day. Your primary concern needs to be minimizing trauma to Ethan and Sophie, she said. Children often blame themselves for their parents' divorce, especially if they sense ongoing conflict. She outlined strategies for the initial conversation with Lisa and helped me plan how we'd eventually tell the children together, regardless of how angry we might be with each other. Kids need to see that their parents can co-parent civilly, Dr. Mitchell explained. Even if your marriage is ending, your parenting partnership doesn't have to. She also warned me about the emotional toll the confrontation would take. You've been living with this knowledge for weeks now, processing it gradually. When you confront Lisa, she's going to experience shock, denial, anger, and grief all at once. The conversation will likely be volatile, so plan accordingly. Dr. Mitchell suggested I arrange for the children to be elsewhere during the confrontation and recommended having a bag packed for Lisa, since she'd probably need to leave the house temporarily. I chose Saturday afternoon for the confrontation. Ethan was at a friend's house working on a group project, and Sophie was at my sister's place for a sleepover. Lisa and I would be alone. I spent Saturday morning preparing like I was going to trial. I spread the evidence across our dining room table like a prosecutor preparing for the most important case of my career. Credit card statements, surveillance photos Patricia had taken, printouts of text message records from our phone company showing the volume of communication between Lisa and Brad's number, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. The visual impact was overwhelming. Months of deception laid out in chronological order, telling the story of how my wife had methodically destroyed our marriage. When Lisa walked into the dining room at 2 p.m., expecting to discuss our weekend plans, she froze in the doorway. Sit down, Lisa. Her face went white as she looked at the papers spread across the table. She remained standing, gripping the doorframe. Michael, what is this? You tell me. You're the one who made these charges, met with this man. Lied to our children. She moved closer to the table, her eyes scanning the evidence. I watched her face as she processed what she was seeing. Recognition, then panic, then a calculating look as she tried to figure out how much I actually knew. 6 months, I said quietly. 6 months of lies. 6 months of sneaking around with the father of one of your students. She sank into the chair across from me, her hands trembling. How did you find out? Does it matter? The question is why, Lisa? After 22 years, why? The conversation that followed was the most painful 3 hours of my life. Lisa cycled through denial, anger, justification, and finally, tearful confession. First came the denial. These don't prove anything. So I had coffee with a parent. So I went to lunch with a colleague. You're being paranoid. I slid Patricia's surveillance photos across the table. Colleagues don't kiss like this in parking lots. Then came the anger. You had me followed? You hired a private investigator to spy on your own wife? How could you violate my privacy like that? Your privacy? Lisa, you've been having an affair for 6 months. You've been lying to me every day, lying to our children, spending our money on hotels and restaurants with another man, and you're upset about your privacy? The justifications came next, and they cut deeper than anything else. You're never here, she said, her voice rising. You work 12-hour days. You're exhausted when you come home. We never talk anymore. When's the last time you asked me about my day? When's the last time you really listened to what I was saying? So you decided to find someone who would talk to you? Is that your excuse? It's not an excuse, it's an explanation. Brad makes me feel alive again. He listens to me. He cares about my thoughts, my dreams, my feelings. When's the last time you looked at me the way he does? When's the last time you made me feel beautiful? What about our children's feelings, Lisa? What about Ethan's basketball games you've missed? What about Sophie's school plays you've skipped for your afternoon meetings? Last night, Sophie was having an allergic reaction, and you were unreachable because you were with him. That hit home. Lisa's defensive posture crumbled, and she started crying. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. It started as just friendship. He was going through his divorce, and I was helping him understand the school system for his daughter. We started talking, and then you started sleeping with him. She flinched but nodded. Tell me about Brad, I said. Tell me about this man who's worth destroying our family for. Lisa wiped her eyes and looked at me with something approaching defiance. He's kind. He's attentive. He makes me feel like I matter. You matter here, Lisa. You matter to me, to Ethan, to Sophie. Do I? When's the last time you complimented me? When's the last time you planned a surprise for me, or bought me flowers, or suggested we go somewhere special? You take me for granted, Michael. You have for years. Her words stung because they contained a grain of truth. I had gotten comfortable in our marriage. I had stopped making an effort to court her, to make her feel special. But comfort wasn't betrayal. So instead of talking to me about feeling unappreciated, you decided to have an affair. I tried talking to you. I've been trying to get your attention for months. You just grunt and nod and go back to your work or your TV or whatever else is more interesting than your wife. Lisa, even if everything you're saying is true, even if I've been the worst husband in the world, that doesn't justify what you've done. Adults don't solve marriage problems by sleeping with other people. The conversation went in circles for another hour. Lisa alternated between defending her choices and apologizing for them. She claimed she loved Brad, but also insisted it wasn't serious. She said she wanted to save our marriage, but also complained about everything wrong with me and our relationship. Finally, I called a timeout. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to pack a bag and stay at your sister's house until we can figure out a more permanent arrangement. We're going to meet with Dr. Mitchell to plan how to tell the kids, and we're going to start divorce proceedings. Michael, please. Can't we try counseling? Can't we work through this? Lisa, you've been lying to me for 6 months. You've endangered our financial security, your professional reputation, and our children's stability. For what? For some divorced insurance adjuster who sweet-talks you over coffee? That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, my voice rising for the first time. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've been working extra hours to pay for hotel rooms where my wife sleeps with another man? Is it fair that our kids have been making excuses for why mommy misses their events? Is it fair that last night, while Sophie was having a medical emergency, you were unreachable because you were with him? Lisa's tears stopped. Her expression hardened. You're not perfect either, Michael. You think I don't know about the money you spend on tools you don't need? You think I don't notice how you check out other women when we go out? You think I don't see how you've let yourself go? How you've stopped caring about your appearance? I stared at her in disbelief. Are you seriously comparing buying construction equipment to having an affair? Are you actually trying to blame me for your choices? I'm saying we both have problems. I'm saying this marriage has been dying for years, and I found someone who makes me feel alive again. No, Lisa, you have a problem. I have a cheating wife. The conversation deteriorated from there. Lisa accused me of being emotionally distant, financially controlling, and boring. I accused her of being selfish, dishonest, and destructive. We said things that couldn't be taken back, things designed to hurt as much as possible. Finally, exhausted and raw, we reached a temporary truce. What about Brad? Lisa asked quietly. What about him? Will you, will you tell his ex-wife? Will you contact the school? I hadn't considered either option, but her questions gave me an idea of how much leverage I actually had. That depends entirely on how cooperative you are in this divorce process. If you fight me on custody or try to hide assets, then yes, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Lisa stared at me for a long moment, perhaps realizing for the first time that I was serious about ending our marriage. I need time to think. You can think at your sister's house. I want you gone before the kids get home tomorrow. Lisa packed 2 suitcases that evening, moving through our bedroom like a ghost. I stayed downstairs, not trusting myself to watch her gather her things without saying something I'd regret. Before she left, she tried one more time to salvage the situation. Michael, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I love you. I love our family. Can't we at least try counseling? Lisa, 6 months ago, maybe we could have tried counseling. But you didn't come to me with problems in our marriage. You went to another man. You made choices that can't be undone. So that's it? 22 years and you're just throwing it all away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. She left without another word. The kids took the news of her temporary absence surprisingly well when I explained that Mom and Dad were having some problems and needed some space to work things out. Are you getting divorced? Ethan asked bluntly over breakfast the next morning. I'd planned to wait until Lisa and I could tell them together, but my son's direct question deserved an honest answer. We're considering it, buddy. We'll know more soon. Is it because Mom's been acting weird lately? The fact that 14-year-old Ethan had noticed Lisa's behavior changes confirmed what I'd suspected. The kids weren't as oblivious as we'd hoped. What do you mean by weird? I asked. Just different. She's on her phone all the time and she seems distracted when we talk to her. Plus, she's missed like half my games this season. Sophie nodded in agreement. She forgot to pick me up from Emma's house last week. Emma's mom had to call you. And yesterday when I was sick, she didn't come home until really late, Sophie added. She said she was at work, but it seemed like a really long work meeting. The conversation broke my heart. Our children had been paying the price for Lisa's choices without even understanding why. They'd been making excuses for her absences, covering for her distraction, adapting to her new priorities. Sometimes adults make mistakes that affect their whole family, I said carefully. But no matter what happens between Mom and me, we both love you very much. That will never change. Will we have to move? Sophie asked, her voice small. No, sweetheart. This is your home. Nothing's going to change that. Over the next few days, I found myself having conversations with the kids that I'd never expected to have. They asked practical questions about custody arrangements, holiday schedules, and whether they'd still be able to stay in their current schools. But they also asked deeper questions about love, marriage, and why people make choices that hurt the people they care about. Did you and Mom ever really love each other? Sophie asked one evening while I helped her with homework. Yes, we did. We still do in some ways. But sometimes love isn't enough to fix the problems in a relationship. What kind of problems? Adult problems that are complicated and hard to explain. Ethan, being older, was more direct in his questioning. Did mom cheat on you? The question caught me off guard. I'd been prepared to discuss divorce in general terms, but I hadn't expected him to guess the specific cause. What makes you ask that? I'm not stupid, Dad. She's been acting sketchy for months, always on her phone, always making excuses about where she's been. Plus, you've been really angry and sad lately, even when you try to hide it. I realized that trying to protect the children from the truth might actually be doing them a disservice. They were old enough to sense that something was seriously wrong, and their imaginations might be creating scenarios worse than the reality. Yes, I said finally. Mom has been seeing someone else. Ethan absorbed this information with the stoicism I'd come to associate with teenage boys. That sucks. Yeah, it does. Are you okay? The question coming from my 14-year-old son nearly broke me. I will be. We all will be. Dr. Mitchell helped Lisa and me plan a family meeting for the following Saturday. Despite our personal animosity, we managed to present a united front when telling Ethan and Sophie that we were getting divorced. This has nothing to do with anything you've done, Lisa said, following Dr. Mitchell's script. Sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt their marriages, and that's what happened here. What kind of mistakes? Sophie asked. Lisa and I exchanged glances. We'd agreed beforehand that the children didn't need to know the specific details of the affair, but we also wanted to be honest enough that they could process what was happening. The kind that break trust between married people, I said. When trust is broken badly enough, sometimes it can't be repaired. Ethan, being older and having already guessed the truth, asked more pointed questions about logistics. Where would they live? How often would they see each parent? What about holidays and birthdays? We're still working out those details, Lisa said, but we want to make sure both of you feel secure and loved. Will you and Dad still be friends? Sophie asked. Lisa and I looked at each other across the kitchen table. At that moment, friendship seemed impossible. There was too much hurt, too much anger, too much broken trust. We'll always be your parents, I said finally, and we'll always work together to take care of you, even if we're not married anymore. It wasn't the answer Sophie wanted, but it was the most honest response I could give. The conversation was difficult, but necessary. Dr. Mitchell observed and took notes, later telling me privately that both children seemed resilient and that their primary concern was maintaining stability in their daily routines. They're handling this better than many adults would, she said, but you'll need to be prepared for delayed reactions. Sometimes children process divorce trauma weeks or months after the initial conversations. While we worked through the family dynamics, Jim handled the legal aspects of the divorce. He filed the initial paperwork and, at my request, sent a formal letter to the Roosevelt Elementary School District, informing them that one of their teachers was engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a student's parent. Are you sure you want to do this? Jim asked when I made the request. It's going to escalate things significantly. She chose to have an affair with a parent. She chose to use school time and resources to facilitate that affair. There are professional standards she's violated, and the district has a right to know. The school district's response was swift and thorough. Lisa was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. The investigation involved interviews with other parents, a review of Lisa's communications on school equipment, and an examination of her professional conduct over the past year. What they found went beyond the affair with Brad. Lisa had been using school computers to communicate with him during work hours. She'd left her classroom unattended on several occasions to take personal phone calls. She'd even arranged to have Brad's daughter move to her classroom mid-semester, which violated several district policies about conflicts of interest. Most damaging was the discovery that Lisa had used her position as a teacher to gain access to confidential information about Brad's custody battle with his ex-wife. She'd shared details about his daughter's academic performance and behavioral assessments that should have remained private. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Lisa was required to turn in her keys and school-issued equipment. She wasn't allowed on campus except for official meetings related to the investigation. The stress of the investigation, combined with the divorce proceedings, took a visible toll on Lisa. She lost weight, developed dark circles under her eyes, and seemed increasingly agitated during our brief interactions about the children. Brad, meanwhile, made a calculation that probably saved his relationship with his own daughter. When the school district contacted him as part of their investigation, he immediately ended his relationship with Lisa and hired a lawyer to protect his parental rights. I had no idea this would affect my daughter's education, he told the investigators, according to Jim, who had contacts in the district. I thought it was just two adults getting to know each other. His quick abandonment of Lisa was probably the smartest move he could have made from a legal standpoint, but it left Lisa completely isolated. Her sister remained supportive, but made it clear that she couldn't stay in the guest room indefinitely. Most of our mutual friends were taking a wait-and-see approach to the divorce, which in practice meant they weren't taking sides but weren't inviting Lisa to social gatherings either. The school district's final decision came down 3 days before Thanksgiving. Lisa would not be terminated, but she would receive a formal reprimand that would remain in her personnel file permanently. She would be transferred to Madison Elementary across town and would not be eligible for promotion or tenure consideration for 5 years. Additionally, she was required to complete professional development courses on appropriate workplace behavior and boundary setting. For an elementary school teacher with 15 years of experience and previous aspirations of becoming a principal, the punishment was professionally devastating. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that the district's punishment was too harsh, but Jim pointed out that they were actually being lenient. In many districts, an inappropriate relationship with a student's parent would result in immediate termination and loss of teaching credentials. She should be grateful she still has a job, Jim told me. A lot of teachers in her situation would be looking for new careers. The divorce proceedings moved forward through the winter months. Despite her initial threats to fight for full custody, Lisa's legal position weakened considerably after the school district's investigation. Her lawyer advised her to accept a joint custody arrangement that gave me primary residence of the children. Your wife's attorney knows she can't win a custody battle, Jim explained during one of our strategy sessions. The affair, the lies, the professional misconduct, it all paints a picture of someone who prioritizes her own desires over her children's needs. The custody evaluation process was thorough and invasive. A court-appointed social worker interviewed both Lisa and me separately, spoke with the children, and conducted home visits to assess our living situations. The evaluator's report was favorable to me, but not particularly damaging to Lisa. It noted that both parents loved their children and were capable of providing appropriate care. However, it also documented the stability issues in Lisa's life over the past year and recommended that the children's primary residence remain with me. The final custody agreement gave Lisa every other weekend, alternating holidays, and 4 weeks during the summer. It was a 70-30 split that reflected both my more stable work schedule and the children's expressed preference to remain in their current schools and activities. The financial settlement was more complex and contentious. Lisa argued that she deserved half of everything, including the value of my construction business. I countered that her affair had caused significant financial damage through credit card misuse, and that her reduced earning potential due to the school district reprimand should be considered her responsibility. She spent thousands of our dollars on her affair, I told Jim. Hotels, restaurants, gifts for him that never came home. Why should I have to split assets that she essentially stole from our marriage to fund her infidelity? The financial discovery process revealed more damage than I'd initially realized. Beyond the obvious charges for hotels and restaurants, Lisa had taken cash advances from our credit cards to pay for gifts for Brad. She'd also opened a store credit card without my knowledge and used it to buy new clothes and lingerie. We eventually settled on a division that gave Lisa 40% of our marital assets, including half the equity in our house, which I would buy out over 5 years. She would receive limited spousal support for 3 years, enough to help her establish independent housing, but not enough to maintain her previous lifestyle. It's not what she wanted, Jim told me after the final settlement conference, but it's fair given the circumstances. The judge made it clear that infidelity has consequences, even in a no-fault divorce state. The divorce was finalized on a cold Tuesday in February, 11 months after I'd first seen that text message from Brad. Spring brought new routines and tentative stability. Ethan and Sophie adjusted to the custody schedule better than I'd expected. They seemed to appreciate the predictability of knowing exactly when they'd be with each parent. Lisa moved into a small apartment near Madison Elementary. The transfer meant a longer commute and a more challenging student population, But she threw herself into her work with the intensity of someone trying to rebuild a damaged reputation. Our interactions remained civil but formal. We communicated primarily through a co-parenting app that documented all exchanges and kept emotions out of scheduling discussions. Dr. Mitchell had recommended this approach, and it worked well for us. The children's biggest concern during this period was whether I was lonely. Sophie, in particular, seemed worried that I was sad living in the house by myself when they were at their mother's apartment. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I assured her during one of our evening walks around the neighborhood. Sometimes adults need time to figure out what makes them happy. "What makes you happy, Dad?" The question caught me off guard. After focusing so intensely on survival and logistics for nearly a year, I hadn't given much thought to happiness. "You and your brother make me happy," I said. "My work makes me happy when I'm building something that will last. And I think I'd like to find someone to share those things with eventually." "Like a girlfriend?" "Maybe someday. Would that bother you?" Sophie considered this seriously. "As long as she's nice to us and doesn't try to replace Mom." "No one could ever replace your mom in your life," I said. "She'll always be your mother, no matter what." That summer, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and casual dinners arranged through mutual friends or dating apps. It felt strange and awkward after 22 years of marriage, but also oddly liberating. The process of dating in my 40s was completely different from dating in my 20s. There were complicated logistics involving custody schedules, career obligations, and the emotional baggage that came with divorce. But there was also a clarity about what I wanted that hadn't existed when I was younger. I wanted someone who communicated directly instead of expecting me to read her mind. I wanted someone who was excited about building a life together instead of taking partnership for granted. I wanted someone who understood that love required effort and attention, not just feelings. The first woman I dated more than casually was Jennifer, a nurse at the local hospital who'd been divorced for 3 years. She understood the complexities of co-parenting and had 2 children of her own, Emma, who was Sophie's age, and Marcus, who was a year younger than Ethan. "The trick," she told me over dinner one evening, "is not to compare everything to your previous marriage. This is something completely new." Jennifer was patient with my learning curve and never pressured me to introduce her to Ethan and Sophie before I was ready. When I finally did, 6 months into our relationship, both kids liked her immediately. "She's really pretty, Dad," Sophie whispered to me after Jennifer's first visit to our house. "And she didn't try too hard to be our friend." Ethan's approval was more subtle but equally clear. He started asking when Jennifer would be joining us for family activities, and he seemed more relaxed when she was around. "She makes you smile again," he told me one evening after Jennifer had gone home. "You haven't smiled much since the divorce?" The observation reminded me how much my children had been affected by the dissolution of their parents' marriage. They'd been watching, worrying, adapting to changes they didn't fully understand. Seeing me happy again was probably as important for their emotional well-being as any custody arrangement or financial settlement. Lisa's reaction to my dating was complicated. According to the kids, she'd asked several pointed questions about Jennifer, but she never directly commented to me about my relationship status. Her own dating life remained a mystery, and I didn't ask. The second anniversary of our divorce came and went without fanfare. By then, our new normal felt genuinely normal. Ethan was a junior in high school, focused on basketball and college applications. Sophie was thriving in 8th grade, involved in drama club and student government. Lisa had found her footing at Madison Elementary and was slowly rebuilding her professional reputation. She'd completed her required professional development courses and had received positive evaluations from her new principal. Our co-parenting relationship had evolved into something functional and respectful. We attended school events together without drama, coordinated holiday schedules efficiently, and even managed to have brief friendly conversations during child exchanges. The most significant change came in the spring of the 3rd year post-divorce. Jennifer and I had been discussing moving in together, a step that would require careful conversation with both sets of children. "I think they're ready," Jennifer said one evening, as we watched Sophie and Jennifer's daughter Emma work on a school project together. "Look at them. They already feel like sisters." She was right. Over the past year, our children had formed genuine relationships with each other. Ethan had become a protective big brother figure to Emma, and Sophie enjoyed having another girl around for activities and advice. When I brought up the possibility of Jennifer and her children moving in with us, both Ethan and Sophie were enthusiastically supportive. "Does this mean Emma and I would share a room?" Sophie asked excitedly. "We'd have to reconfigure the house a bit, but yes, if that's what you girls want. And Jennifer's son Marcus could have the basement room once you finish it?" I'd been slowly converting our basement into additional living space, partly as a project to keep my hands busy and partly in anticipation of needing more room as the kids got older. "That's the plan." Ethan nodded approvingly. "Jennifer makes you happy, Dad. We can see it." Their acceptance meant everything to me. These were the same children who'd weathered their parents' divorce with remarkable resilience, who'd adapted to split custody and blended family dinners without complaint. When I told Lisa about my plans to move in with Jennifer, I expected some resistance or at least complicated emotions. Instead, she surprised me. "I'm glad you found someone," she said during one of our brief conversations at Sophie's school play. "You deserve to be happy." "Thank you, that means a lot." "Michael?" She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. I know I never properly apologized for what I did. Not just the affair, but all of it. The lies, the damage to our family, the pain I caused you and the kids. I looked at her carefully. 3 years had changed Lisa in visible ways. She was thinner, more serious, less spontaneous than the woman I'd married. But she also seemed more grounded, more thoughtful about her words and actions. "I appreciate that," I said. "I know this hasn't been easy for any of us. I want you to know that I've been in counseling for the past 2 years. Individual therapy, not couples counseling. I needed to understand why I made the choices I did." This was news to me. "And what did you learn?" "That I was trying to fill gaps in myself that had nothing to do with you or our marriage. I was feeling invisible, unimportant, like my life was just a series of routines. Brad made me feel seen, but I used that feeling to justify destroying everything that actually mattered." Her honesty was unexpected, but welcome. For 3 years, I'd carried anger about her choices, anger that had gradually faded into indifference, but never quite resolved into understanding. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Every day. Not because I want our marriage back. I think we're both better people apart than we were together at the end. But because I hurt our children, and I hurt you. And I destroyed my career prospects over something that wasn't even real." "What do you mean, not real?" "Brad was never going to leave his comfortable bachelor life for a complicated relationship with a married teacher. I was convenient for him, nothing more. When things got difficult, he disappeared completely. I gave up my family for someone who never actually wanted me long-term." The conversation was surreal. After years of minimal communication, Lisa was offering insights into her thought process that I'd never expected to receive. "Have you talked to the kids about any of this?" I asked. "Some of it. Dr. Mitchell has been helping me figure out how to age-appropriately explain my mistakes without burdening them with adult problems they shouldn't have to understand." "That's good. They've asked questions over the years that I haven't always known how to answer." "Like what?" "Mainly whether you were ever happy in our marriage, or if it was all pretend. Sophie asked me once if you loved another man more than you loved us." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that love isn't a competition, and that your love for her and Ethan was never in question. I said that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love most, but that doesn't mean the love isn't real." "Thank you for that. I know you could have made me the villain in their eyes. They needed their mother to remain their mother, regardless of what happened between us." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Sophie receive flowers after her performance in the spring musical. "She's growing up so fast," Lisa said. "They both are. Ethan's already talking about colleges out of state." "That terrifies me. I feel like I've missed so much of their lives over the past 3 years." "You haven't missed it. You've just experienced it differently. They know you love them, Lisa. That's what matters." The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. We would never be close, but we'd moved beyond the anger and resentment that had characterized our interactions since the divorce. 3 months later, Jennifer and her children officially moved into our house. The transition was smoother than anyone expected, partly because we'd taken our time and partly because all four kids were genuinely excited about the new arrangement. It's like having a built-in sleepover every night, Sophie announced after the first week. Ethan appreciated having Marcus around for video games and basketball practice. It's nice having another guy in the house, he told me. Jennifer's cool, but she doesn't understand sports like we do. The logistics were occasionally complicated. Four teenagers meant complex scheduling for school activities, sports, part-time jobs, and social lives. But the house felt alive in a way it hadn't since the divorce. Lisa's reaction to our blended family was more positive than I'd expected. She was friendly with Jennifer during school events and even offered to take Emma and Marcus occasionally when Jennifer needed extra help with scheduling. "Your father is a good man," I overheard her telling Emma during one pickup exchange. "You're lucky to have him as a bonus dad." The comment surprised me, both for its generosity and for its acknowledgement of how our family had evolved beyond traditional definitions. As autumn approached, marking 4 years since I'd first discovered Lisa's affair, I found myself reflecting on how completely our lives had changed. The man who'd sat on his back deck that evening, watching his son practice basketball while his wife texted another man, would barely recognize the blended family that now gathered around our expanded dinner table each night. Ethan was now a senior, fielding college recruitment calls and working part-time at a local sporting goods store. Sophie had developed into a confident young woman with strong opinions about everything from environmental policy to music. Emma and Marcus had seamlessly integrated into our family dynamics, and Jennifer had become not just my partner but a genuine co-parent to all four children. The most unexpected development was the gradual evolution of my relationship with Lisa, from bitter antagonism to respectful co-parenting to something approaching friendship. We would never be close, but we'd learn to appreciate each other's role in our children's lives. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't seen that text message?" Lisa asked me during one of our rare private conversations at Ethan's homecoming game. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Do you think you would have eventually ended the affair on your own?" "I don't know. I like to think so, but I was so lost in the fantasy of it all. I might have kept going until Brad ended it himself, which probably would have happened eventually. And then what? I probably would have found someone else to make me feel special, or I would have sunk into depression when the excitement wore off. Either way, our marriage would have ended eventually, just messier and more painful for everyone. So you think this was better?" "I think this was honest. Painful, but honest. And look at what you've built since then." She gestured toward the field, where Jennifer was cheering loudly for Ethan while Emma and Marcus argued about something in the stands next to her. "You're happier now than I ever saw you in the last 5 years of our marriage." She was right. The man who'd spent his evenings wondering why his wife seemed distant and distracted had been replaced by someone who looked forward to coming home each day. The constant low-level tension that had characterized the final years of our marriage was gone, replaced by the comfortable chaos of a busy household full of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "What about you?" I asked. "Are you happy?" Lisa considered the question seriously. "I'm content. I'm proud of the work I'm doing at Madison Elementary. I've built real friendships with other teachers there. I have a good relationship with the kids, and I think I'm finally the mother they deserve. I'm not sure I need more than that right now. But someday? Maybe. I'm in no hurry. I spent so many years looking for something outside myself to make me feel complete that I want to make sure I can be happy alone before I try to be happy with someone else." Her answer reflected a maturity that hadn't been present during our marriage. The woman who'd sought validation through an affair had been replaced by someone who understood that happiness had to come from within. The conversation was interrupted by a touchdown that sent the entire stadium into celebration. As we stood and cheered with everyone else, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us all to this moment. Later that evening, as Jennifer and I cleaned up after a house full of teenagers celebrating the football victory, she asked me something that had clearly been on her mind. "Do you ever regret how everything happened with Lisa?" "You mean, do I wish she hadn't had the affair?" "I guess I mean, do you ever wonder if you two could have worked things out? If you'd tried harder or gotten counseling before it got to that point?" I thought about her question while rinsing plates and loading the dishwasher. I used to wonder about that a lot, but honestly, I think we were both so busy being married that we forgot to pay attention to whether we actually liked each other anymore. The affair was a symptom, not the cause. "What do you mean?" I mean that by the time Lisa started looking outside our marriage for excitement, we'd already stopped being partners. We were just two people sharing a house and raising kids together. Maybe if we'd recognized that earlier, we could have fixed it. But maybe we were just too different, or too set in our patterns. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes relationships run their course. That doesn't make them failures. Exactly. Lisa and I had 22 years together. We raised two amazing kids. We learned things about ourselves and about love that we needed to learn. The fact that our marriage ended doesn't erase the good parts. And now? Now I'm with someone who makes me want to be a better partner every day. Someone who communicates instead of withdrawing when things get difficult. Someone who thinks building a life together is an adventure, not a chore. Jennifer smiled and bumped my shoulder with hers. Someone who doesn't mind that your idea of adventure involves construction projects and teenage drama. Someone who actually enjoys both of those things. As we finished cleaning and turned off the lights, I realized that the question of regret had become irrelevant. The choices Lisa had made 4 years ago had led directly to the life I was living now. A life filled with love, laughter, challenge, and possibility. The price of her betrayal had been our marriage, her career advancement, and years of painful adjustment for all of us. But the unexpected benefit had been the opportunity for all of us to become more authentic versions of ourselves. Ethan had learned that resilience and adaptability were strengths he possessed. Sophie had discovered that she could handle major life changes with grace and humor. Lisa had been forced to confront parts of herself she'd been avoiding and had emerged more self-aware and honest. And I had learned that love didn't have to be complicated, that partnership could be joyful, and that the life I'd thought was ending had actually just been preparing me for something better. As I turned off the last light and headed upstairs, where Jennifer was already reading in bed and the sounds of 4 teenagers settling in for the night echoed through the house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment with my present and genuine excitement about my future. The betrayal that had shattered my old life had made room for this new one. And this new one was exactly where I was meant to be. In the quiet moments before sleep, I sometimes thought about that evening 4 years ago when I'd seen Brad's text message on Lisa's phone. At the time, it had felt like the end of everything I'd worked to build. Now I understood it had been the beginning of everything I was meant to become. The price of betrayal had been steep, but the rewards of truth had been greater. And as I drifted off to sleep next to the woman who'd helped me remember what love could feel like, I knew that sometimes the most devastating endings are actually the most necessary beginnings.